You know, years ago, I was pretty frustrated with the data in Sonoma County and kind of talked to some of my friends, Chris, Ron at the time, and some others, and said, you know, our data is bad. We've got to do something about it. We've been talking to the county office and really kind of describing some of the needs, and didn't feel like there was a lot of movement. So eventually we got together and just said, why don't we do this ourselves? And so we talked about how to differentiate instruction for kids and how to really meet the needs of all of our learners. And I came to get introduced to Judy through somebody called, well, Adam. Adam was superintendent in the Wright School District and became the SELPA director, and introduced me to Judy, talked to her, said, yeah, you seem like the right person, like what you're selling. And so talked to some of my friends, and we all were kind of looking for the same thing, and said, let's go down this path together, which is unique, right? We haven't done this in Sonoma County very often, where we branched off and really done some work together. So that's kind of how we came together, this group of people. And then Pioneer Olivet was also in there because, again, I had a friend in Pioneer Olivet who worked for me as a director of curriculum and said, hey, you want in? And he was like, absolutely. So they've dropped off since then. They're doing the work, though, but it's us three. So, Chris, passing to you.
Yeah, so Chris Vandenhoevel, superintendent in Healdsburg. And I know it's funny because I know people on each board, which I didn't anticipate. But great to have you all together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why we're here today. So we've been engaged in this work for a year now, and my board is showing up, which is good. We got 3 people en route. They'll be here shortly.
Steve, this is usually when we applaud in Healdsburg.
So we've been doing this as a district leadership team for a year. You all are somewhat familiar with it, I think. You passed a policy early on to help support the work. But today is really about you hearing more of what we're up to hear about a return on investment that you all have made on behalf of the kids in your respective districts. And really what we want is for you all to understand the work that we're doing and then be able to support it both through policy and dollars into the future. So we really have only scratched the surface. It's actually awesome. We had our first meeting with 100 some odd people at SCO and district, different school teams working together. It was just really exhilarating to see everyone together working on a common goal. So looking for your support and understanding so that you can support the work moving forward. And you're going to hear a lot of go fast to go, or go slow to go fast. And I know as a board member, sometimes that's not the easiest thing, but we have to be very intentional in this work and we need your support to do it. So Rachel?
Okay, so my turn. So I wanted to talk about also what brought us here together. Of course, yes, my predecessor was involved with the early beginnings, but you know, something happened a few years ago, and that was the pandemic. And before that, as you all recall, we had some other natural disasters that also impacted our ability to really work with students, or the students' ability to really all out learn. And so one of the things that we realized is that the response to intervention, the model that was used previously, was really primarily designed to address the academic side of education. And what we found ourselves was needing to really find a model that was or a framework that was able to incorporate the social emotional side of learning as well as the behavior side of learning. And so we found that MTSS, using that approach or using that framework, really helps us address the students more holistically in a way that that's needed more than ever before. And so in previewing what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of make sure we're going to kind of calibrate our understanding of what multi-tiered systems of support is. What it looks like, talk about our common definition that was developed in conjunction with all the districts working together. And then also Judy will be speaking about the work that we've done to date, and then also lay out the roadmap for where we're headed from this point onward. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and just turn it over to Judy.
Good afternoon, everyone. That's where you say, good afternoon. It's really an honor to be here and a pleasure to work with y'all. It's been, March 17th was the 1 year that we got together and we started having conversations about it. So I don't believe in the expert model. I don't think one person knows everything to know about this stuff, but been doing this for a long time. Started my career as a teacher, worked as a school psychologist, did a bunch of administrative work. My last real job before I went to the dark role of education, which is consulting, because what do consultants know? I was the chief academic officer in Los Angeles Unified School District, a little district south of here. Worked in Long Beach, California with Carl Cohn for a bunch of years as the assistant of student support services, blah, blah, blah. So I say that because we did this in Los Angeles across 1,000 schools and had incredible return on investment in a very short period of time. And it's really about training your school teams to be able to use data and problem solve. And so what I hope to do with you today, and it was very well laid out by the superintendents, is basically calibrating a common language, common understanding. Because if you go around the room and say, what does this mean to you? We're going to get all different types of answers to that. So what we want to do is just calibrate to make sure we know what it is. Jeremy talked about how did the consortium get started, and then just share with you some of the work that we've done to date, and to your point, where we're headed with this. So I'm a facilitator of learning, and so my goal is to close this meeting and have you on your way home for dinner by 5:45 at the latest. Earlier, if you're really good. So anyway, how did we get here? We sort of know. Jeremy outlined it. What have we done? Where are we headed now? And what is the importance of having board support with this? So I always start every presentation with this. You know, even if you're on the right track, you're going to get run over if you stay in the same place, because there is lots of good stuff going on in your districts. What we're doing is we're fine tuning it, getting it organized, and making it better for kids. So this work is about mindsets. It's really about mindsets. For example, when we think about equity, we think about culturally responsive practices. But I would push you to think about equity being, and we had this conversation earlier today. If Rachel is an incredible teacher that knows how to use data and problem solve, and my kid gets put into her class, but Victor's child gets put into Jeremy's class, who doesn't plan for lessons, who doesn't know how to use data, the equity issue is right there. You follow what I'm saying? So equity is bigger than just saying culturally responsive, Black versus white versus brown. This is really about how do we make sure that our kids all have equity across buildings, across teachers, that they have equitable access to the same robust, really good instruction. So that's the goal of all of this work, is that we get there. So mindsets are huge. I always ask people to go along this journey with me with these two questions. Oops. I don't think, oh, there you go. Are you happy with your data? And is every classroom you put your own flesh and blood? Meaning your aunt, your niece, your nephew, your own child, your grandbaby, and you don't get to pick what classroom. So are you happy with your data? And would you put your own flesh and blood in any classroom in your district? So I usually get for the bus as we do this work. This is, one of my heroes, Maya Angelou, says, do the best you can until you know better than do better. So our job is to just take where we are and get better. So the prevailing belief about this work, in my, opinion as a central office administrator, is that everybody in the district office is there for one reason, and that's to make sure that your teachers and leaders have what they need to run their schools and have kids be successful. So the prevailing belief is that our job is to make sure that we clear the branches out of the pathway so that people can run faster and do good stuff around academics, behavior, and social emotional well-being. So you have stickies in front of you. What I'm going to ask you to do is if you could take 3 stickies, put one thought on each sticky. What pops into your head when you hear the 4-letter word MTSS? And then when you're ready, just post them on that chart paper over there. What pops into your head when you hear MTSS? 3 stickies, one thought per sticky. And I'm happy to post them if you don't want to get off. Yep, that first chart paper right there.
So after this.
Okay. Just let them up there and. You turn over the handle. I like that. Getting going.
It's right. They're too far away.
Ruby,
Okay. I don't get you.
feel good to get up and move? No, we're all, we are. Observing back here. Participate all the time. Your turn.
All the superintendents are like super nervous.
What are they gonna say?
Now I'm curious. Let's see.
That dead time.
Should we bring it to order now while we're doing this?
Yeah, go ahead and do
We
that.
should, all right, we got to bring this thing to order so we can have some minutes. So, got 3 districts here. Let's figure out how we want to do this. We take your guidance, everyone.
Roll call.
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, do you want to do slides?
We probably should do the flag salute and a roll call, I would think. Yes?
I'm going to take roll call for everybody. I apologize in advance if I mispronounce anybody's name.
Microphone's not on yet.
It is.
It's on, it's just, their speakers are down because of all the wireless.
Okay. Well, I'll do my best. So for Windsor Unified School District, President Bill Adams, Trustee Ahmad, Trustee Carnation,
Here.
Trustee Cagorno.
Here.
Superintendent Jeremy Decker.
Here.
Okay. For Mark West, President Victor Knight.
Here.
Trustee Brian Burke.
Here.
Superintendent Dr. Rachel Valenzuela.
Here.
And for Healdsburg Unified School District, Vice President Crystal Lopez Pardo.
Here.
Mike Messel.
Here.
Yeah. Guadalupe Lopez Jimenez.
She's en route.
Okay. Araceli Romo Flores.
Also en route.
Superintendent Chris Vanden Heuvel.
Jen, we had some other people over here to my left. Maybe they could say their names and you could have their helpers make sure we have their names. We have two other trustees. Assistant Superintendent Ferrer is here.
Are you done?
Can you say in which district? Oh, sorry. I'm Claudia Florio. I'm principal at Mark West Elementary. Emily Todd, principal of Reedley Elementary. We're all in the Mark West district. Okay. Michelle Frenchie, Mark West Charter School. Principal, sorry, I guess I should have done that. Christina Hunt, first grade teacher, Mark West.
Lisa Warren, Director of Instructional Services for Mark West District.
Lisa Chapman, Mark West District TOSA. Karen Ferrer, Assistant Superintendent.
Ryan, Director of Special
And
Interpreter.
Bueno.
Thank you.
and the fuzzy guy right behind you.
Fuzzy guy. Fuzzy guy.
Brad Rigney, Director of Technology.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah. First grade teacher, do you mind?
Not working today.
That was awesome. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our agenda had Rich leading it.
All right, now you're not getting out till 5:45.
Thanks, Judy.
All right, are we good to go?
Yep.
All right, so let me just read some of these out loud. These are awesome. So what pops into your head? Packaging of past practices. Don't forget the data. Making adjustments based on data. Responsiveness. Intervention. What was the one that, another program that is shuffled around. Meeting students where they are. A reading program. Proactive and preventative. Measurement of student success. Equities up here a couple times. Providing equal opportunities to high achieving students. Absolutely. Data must be used to effectively group students. So meeting kids where they are, 3 tiers of support. My job is done. You're awesome. Good. So here's what we know MTSS, and we'll get those typed up and give them, and you can use them and give them to you. So here's what we know about what we have going on in education. Without a framework, we have a pieces and parts, if you will, of a bike. What MTSS does, it helps you use a framework to put together a well-oiled machine, a well-oiled bike that uses data, that uses problem solving, that uses really good instructional interventions, coaching and technical assistance. So one of the things I always ask people to think about is instead of talking about interventions, which sort of connotes that we're going to fix the student, think about how you are going to intensify instruction for kids. So if I'm struggling in 3rd grade reading, it's not about what intervention you're going to put Judy in. It's like, what do we need to do to intensify instruction so Judy gets it? That makes sense? So interventions mean you're going to do something, and you are, but we want people to think about intensifying instruction rather than doing something to a kid, if that makes sense. So what the worker on MTSS is taking the pieces and parts that y'all have going on in your districts and putting it together in a framework that makes sense. And you'll see that MTSS is not another thing, it is the thing. So it's not another program, it's not a reading program, it's basically taking what you have and putting it together. It's a frame, not a box. So there's 6 components to MTSS that we're working from. Most people think of MTSS as the 3 tiers versus it's leadership, it's data and evaluation, it's, how do you build the capacity and structures? What do your school schedules look like that provide enough time for kids to get that extra scoop of learning that they need to get where they are? So what we're doing with your schools is working across all of those 6 buckets and helping folks identify where they are and what they need in terms of doing it. Common language, common understanding. You're going to see very quickly what we did with your leadership teams, district leadership teams and cabinets about common language, common understanding, including the activity that we just did. So if you look at the green, it's really MTSS is about a continuous improvement model, database decision-making, varying levels of intensity, and we'll do a real quick review of those. And it's need-driven, which means if you use your data in your district, your schedule may look different year to year. Your instructional practices may look year to year because the incoming kindergarten kids are going to look different than perhaps last year's kindergarten kids. The incoming 9th grade kids may not have trouble with algebra. They may be rocking it versus the current 9th graders had difficulty with it. So we're just looking at, continuous improvement, using data and doing the right stuff for kids. So it is a way of thinking. It's a mindset. And it's not a program, it's not an intervention, it's a framework. And it applies whether you're doing virtual or doing hybrid, however you're doing it, it works. So we always like to start with what is your compelling why? Like, why are we doing this MT thing, MTSS? What is it? Why are we doing it? And so it's really important to know what your compelling why is. So I'm going to show you a quick video on the importance of knowing your compelling why. Didn't go. Okay, who's going to start? Who's going to hit it?
We got lots of people here.
Yeah, I'm there. Oh, I could do that.
How do I know? A lot of people, when they think of the phrase, how do I know, they always want to put the what behind it. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? The question that you really should ask is, how do I know why I'm here? Because when you know your why, your what becomes more clear and more impactful. If you know, like for instance, people know that I do comedy, but that's what I do. My why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. So I can do comedy, I can write books, I can be in a movie, because all of it is motivated by my why. In fact, I have a new web series out called Michael Jr. Break Time. We probably just did the 6th episode. It's on YouTube. So every single Wednesday at 3:00, we drop a new episode on YouTube of Michael Jr. Break Time. What it is it's me. I travel around the country and I do stand-up comedy, in case you didn't know. And in the middle of my comedy set sometime, I'll stop and just talk to my audience. And we've been filming this, and it's pretty cool. So we're in Winston-Salem. I'm gonna show you a clip from Winston-Salem. And I'm just talking to this guy in the audience, and he tells me that he's a musical instructor at a school. So I was like, all right, you're a musical instructor, can you sing? Let me hear you sing a song. So this is what happened at the last episode of Michael Jr.'s Break Time. Check it. So you're a musical director. Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing. You know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, son was blind, but now I see.
Okay. Here's what I want you to catch. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what becomes more impactful because you're walking towards or in your purpose.
So, great video, right? So powerful. So what I'd like you to do.
How do I know? A lot of people, when they
There,
think,
now it's working. So what I'd like you to do is, if you could just take a minute individually, get your own voice on this and reflect about what your whys are for engaging and supporting this work of MTSS across your districts. Database decision-making, just take a minute, and then I'm just gonna have you do an elbow share with, somebody sitting next to you. So just take a minute and grab that thought. When you're ready, turn to an elbow partner. Don't do this. Just have a conversation about were you going to do that? Compelling whys as to why we're doing this, why the support, and why we're doing this is so important. Go ahead. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to talk to your elbow partners or partner.
You go. I would say changing their experience in education, their values in education. How they think about school. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, totally. It changes lives. Finally, it provides the means for us to be able
Good answer.
I do see the
Yeah.
I know that really
Mine is, and I didn't really like flesh out fully, but it's like.
two of the teachers work real close.
right, and that's also
And so, right, very much. But
and then so that it eliminates the differences that you start seeing.
I see that. I like what you think. Some of those things are most interventions, and when we're facing kids that are dealing with more and more issues outside the classroom that are impacting inside.
Yeah, I mean, my thing was.
Data can give us some.
How it's linked. Building common language, really common units. So this is.
so it's individualized many times. So how do we get more into that specific?
It's more than a mountain. Because it applies to the-
Probably not proportions,
So, you know,
and then still have more questions. So,
I have the other insights.
Okay, good.
As far as the structure.
Good. All right. So let's just, what you talk about? What are some things that you're compelling wise around this work? What do you think?
When performance is measured, performance improves.
Yep. What's the saying? The bumper sticker, "In God we trust, everybody else bring data." Well, yes. What else do you talk about? Compelling why?
True equity work. You know, if we're giving everybody what they need, that MTSS model would be doing.
Yep. Yep.
That's really the equity work.
Good equity work. Yep.
We were saying it's things like it backs that gut feeling that often as educators, we sit and feel like, I know coming into a meeting that so-and-so is a 3 on something, but now I have a place to put that and I've got support when I go and say, hey, I need help with them. Here's why I need help and what I know.
Great. Excellent. Yeah, my version of that is when I went to LA, we were spending $12.5 million on Read 180. And I'm like, okay, cool. You're doing that. Great. How are the kids doing? How are the children? And they're like, that's a really good question. Nobody had looked at the data, that we were spending all this money on something and we had not really known what the data is. So they think it's working, but now you can know it's working. Great. Anything else? How about one more?
I think for us is the impetus to sort of catch up with the other 2 districts is we need to figure out a way that we are not inadvertently thwarting the potential of our students. We have a lot of people working really hard and we're throwing tens of millions of dollars of shit and it's not working. It's working okay. We are slowly catching up.
Right.
But as Paul and I were sharing, you know, there's a behavior shift that needs to happen.
Did you say shift?
Shift.
Okay, making sure.
I used a different word. It was-
Yes, I was just checking, you know.
I'm just saying.
Oh, we're being taped, so I know you said shift.
But I think, but to me, that's an impetus of,
Yes.
of why.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like, well, why not try just something else? It's not just another program. I see it as a best practices with people who I respect seem to be using it effectively.
Yes.
That's enough for us to
And
give a
it's
try.
yes. And when it's done like a well-oiled framework, you get a lot of return out of investment. And I like somebody put up there about taking the high-achieving kids and pushing them higher. And we'll talk about that in 1 second. It's not about your low-achieving kids only. It's about, we have, especially back under No Child Left Behind, we left our high-achieving kids behind. So this is about everybody gets something. It's not just the low kids or the medium kids. It's about how do we get our high kids higher? Provide them something. So this is where we started as a leadership team at your district levels, is that what do we got going on that's working really well? What do we have working that probably needs to be tweaked? And what is the stuff that we need to just take off the stove, off the burner? And why do we keep doing it when we know it doesn't work? And part of that is you have to have data. You've got to have data to know whether or not what you're doing is making a difference for kids. And so I would say that's been the big push is to people, and you'll see in your folders the early warning systems that folks have put together. So that's where we started, and it has to be data. I'm a data-driven person, so I'm going to say, how do you know it's working? Based on what? As evidenced by. We all as adults, how do we know whether our weight is staying neutral up or down? What do we do? Eat. You ignore the scale, or you put on a pair of pants to see if they fit or not. So we do it all the time. We use data. How do we know whether we need to fill up our car? We use the data on the gauge. So we use it all the time. Why aren't we using it in education as a robust practice? And so that's what we're talking about. So really a fast collective path. We talked about this. And I said, everybody sort of thinks about 3 tiers of instruction when we know all those other components lead to a robust implementation of MTSS, but you got to have leadership. You have to have infrastructures in place. You have to have all these things as a foundation to the work. Okay, it's not working. There we go. All right. So quick review of the 3 levels of instruction. All, some, and few. What do all kids get? What do some kids get? What do a few kids get? The differentiation between those 3, and we're not going any deeper than that, is the time of instruction, the focus of instruction, and the type of instruction that we do. So the differentiation of those 3 tiers is what everybody gets across how much time. If you have kids that need tier 2, it's core plus more time. Tier 3 is core plus a whole lot more time for tier 3. And part of that leads back to what are the infrastructures do you need to have in place in order to give kids core plus more or tier 3 services? You have to have a schedule in your school that allows kids to get that time. Good? Yes, Judy, that's good. All right. So take a look at this school district's diamond. So typically when you see a pyramid, you see it based on tiers 1, 2, and 3. So we might need some hurdle help from folks that are familiar with this. How is this different than what we're used to seeing? That may not be a fair question to board members, so other folks can sort of jump in and look at that. What's really intentionally included in this?
High achievers.
High achievers. Thank you, Jeremy. You must be a superintendent. So yeah, on the left-hand side is the kids that may be at risk, tiers 1, 2, and 3. On the right-hand side, these folks have included the kids that need to be pushed to higher levels of instruction to accelerate, to continue to grow. So I give that to you to think about, that it's not just about your low kids. It's about how do we make sure everybody gets what they need. Other thing, and I'm going to move quickly, and if you want me to slow down, just raise your hand and flag me appropriately. So this is special ed, because people say, well, where does special ed fit? Where do they fit in this? And people say, well, you know, they don't, because they have an IEP and they get all their yummy stuff by their special ed teacher, when in fact, specially designed instruction for special ed students is right down the middle. You may have a student that needs work on phonics, and they may have on their IEP, will get specially designed instruction because on phonics instruction for reading. But they may be needing a little work in fluency on math facts, not on their IEP, but they would do core plus more. They would go and get their specially designed instruction in phonics, but they would join another group for tier 2 fluency practice. Does that make sense? So that's a huge mind shift for folks, because a lot of times people say, no, special ed has their own thing. They're a part of the whole thing. And then this one I just put up there. At some point, we'll do the end of The Myth of Average by David Rose, who works in Harvard. It's amazing. So what this is that, you know, to help people sort of get their head around this, you may have a student that is got lots of good skills for tier 1, little shaky for tier 2, and some issues for tier 3. So when people say, because we all have profiles, we're not strong at everything all day, we're not weak at everything all day. So this sort of helps folks look at kids individually and say, what are those strengths? What are those core plus more areas? And what do we know that kids need something totally different? And this may be a little bit too much information, but we want you to just understand that it's all kids have an access to this. And I'm going quickly on that. So here's where we are now. So we calibrated our common language understanding, and as a result of that, we developed in blue non-negotiables. What are your non-negotiables for this work in the district consortium? We came to consensus on it for all of us, and you have a folder that has all of this stuff in it. So you'll have access to it electronically, I believe, or unless they gave you copies of it. Mm-hmm. We came up with a collective definition of MTSS as a consortia. You each have your board policies individually about what that looks like. And the other thing that all the districts have done is they created their own elevator speech, which means they run into a board member or a parent in the grocery store and they're like, what's this MTSS thing? That's your elevator speech. 30 seconds to say what it is in, you know, layman's term, layperson's term that everybody can understand. So each of your districts have same non-negotiables, same board, same definition, but you have your individual board and individual elevator speeches. What we're doing now is we're connecting it to your district, like your LCAP and the things that you have existing, so you can bake it into the DNA of the work of your district. Because we don't want it to be one more thing that shuffles through and it keeps going. The italicized stuff up there is because it's a work in progress, which we'll talk about. So that's a lot of work that that we did. Those are infrastructures that you need to have. And trust me, I've worked with a lot of districts across the country. And if you don't do these things, it collapses like a flan on a cupboard because, yes, sure.
So we could all do this work in a vacuum, but we're in the same room when we do this work.
Hmm.
And so we get to continually refine and bounce ideas off of one another. And it's just super valuable. Rachel brought it up kind of at the beginning, but I know for us, we found it extremely valuable just to talk to our neighbors,
Yep.
when doing this work, even if it's personalized to Windsor.
Yeah.
It's pretty similar because we keep talking about it.
Yeah. And it's an incredible opportunity to develop and support each other. Yeah. So then after we did that, which was a lot, and we're still tightening up elevator speeches as we go. Because what we're going to do tomorrow when we meet is like, what are we going to do with that? What's our plan to do this, to go forward? And this is a go slow to go fast, right? So it's not something that, I mean, typically what happens in education is somebody comes in and says, this is what you should be doing. Now make the schools do it. We're not doing that. We took a year to get all of this stuff that I'm sharing with you together. And we met like once a month. And now we're working with your school teams. And they don't have to do anything except breathe. Breathe and learn. We're not asking them to go back and implement anything. We're using implementation science, which means exploration and installation. They're learning as a team before we go and do anything with your schools. Does that make sense? So the next thing we did is we started having database decisions. Like, how do you know it's working? How do you know it's not working? So we started looking at data use, data platforms. You have the early warning systems for each of your districts. It's the red, yellow, green. So I pushed these guys pretty hard. And then we did resource mapping. What do we have? So we'll get to early warning systems in a second. I'll give you an opportunity to look at it. So this is what we started with last year, which was resource mapping. What do you have for tier 1? What do you have for tier 2? What do you have for tier 3? And so what do you have? What are the evidence-based strategies that you're using? Are you using it yes, no, or maybe? Who supports it? And how do you know it's working? So, and all of these are documents that we can totally give you if you want. But I just gave you a snapshot of it. And it all is based on data. So it's fun when you sit everybody in a room and say, well, we're using this. We are? Who supports it? And how do we know it's working? Well, you can list everything. But usually what falls down is, not just here, but everywhere I work, is that we don't really know what data to look at to see whether or not that is working for kids. So that's part of the work that we're doing. And now the schools are also looking at this as well. So database decision-making. Are you with me or am I going too fast? Okay. All right. Database decision-making, why is it so critical? Because you have to monitor individual kids as well as groups, student groups, to see who's doing well, who's not. You determine what's working for kids, what's not working for kids, and then you implement and do something about it. What we are really good at doing in education is admiring data. We look at it and go, oh, not as good as we used to be, and then we keep going. So this is not about admiring data. This is about stopping and looking at your data, problem solving around your data, and doing something with it. So that's what the schools are learning right now, is how to problem solve. So one of the things that we've looked at, and this is macro, this is your district-wide early warning systems. A lot of time, I'm a secondary person, and so I've worked at all levels, but a lot of times nobody touches secondary because it's hard. Or, and we don't have DIBLs. We don't have those progress monitors in the secondary level as we do in elementary school. So when we started this in Long Beach, we started this work of MTSS database decision-making in our secondary schools. And our schools were pretty big, like 4,000, pretty big schools. And everybody said you couldn't do it because the schools were too big or it was too complicated. We had 2 principals, we had co-principals. And it was back in the day, years ago, during the high school exit exam. So we had kids coming to our high schools. Now remember, Long Beach is like this award-winning, Broad award-winning. We had kids coming to us in 9th grade that weren't on IEPs or 504 plans that couldn't read. Like, how is that possible? We're award-winning. So we started this work in our secondary schools. We sat with our principals knee to knee. We created schedules that would allow them to know how many sections of whatever they needed to do the work. The spring before those kids came into ninth grade, we had teams of folks go out and look at all the eighth grade kids to see how many kids need an acceleration block, how many kids need a reading section. Because in secondary, you can't just add more time. You have to do another section of in your schedule for credit. Anyway, so all of that to say, it started in secondary. It's looking at your attendance, your behavior, your credits, because it starts with, are they on track or off track for graduation? That's where it all started. So, and this is up here, but it's basically, it's a proactive measure to see which kids are doing well and which kids are not. So if you have a kid at the end of first semester, ninth grade, that's not on track for graduating, that's not a good sign. Because the data is inextricable about if the kids, ninth grade kids are not successful, we're going to lose them over the course of the career. So this work is really about how do we stay ahead of where the kids are. So we track your at-risk kids. We make sure that, so I always push people. I work with a district right now that the kids that are chronically absent do as well, or if not better on their test scores, classes, their final, state assessments, and the kids that are chronically, or that are there every day. So they're voting with their feet, right? So they don't come to school because they're not engaged or for whatever reason, which we dig into, but you got a problem if you've got your kids that do well are not coming to school versus the kids that aren't coming to school are failing everything. Two different sets of problems. So the early warning system is really sort of a way for you to look at it across the district in terms of what you have. A, B's, and C's, you're looking at attendance, you're looking at behavior, and you're looking at course performance. And a lot of these things have been said at the national level. And districts here, we looked at local norms to make sure that it aligns with your data there. So in the high schools, so you're looking at GPA, you're looking at credits, you're looking at behavior stuff, course performance. And so each of your districts have created your own early warning system. Because some of you are doing standards-based grading, some of you are doing things a little bit different, but you all have them that I'm sure your soups will walk you through if you haven't already. Yes? Okay. You with me? So you have yours. We created a folder that you can look at all of that. Does anybody want to say anything? Soups? No. So they have it.
Yeah, I think we all have a draft,
Yeah.
but there's still a work in progress, so they're not finalized yet.
So it's all digital. You have all of that. And so again, I'm going fast and I'm filling your heads with a lot of stuff. The hope is, and hope is not a strategy, but the hope is that you meet with your soups and you unpack whatever it is that you want to have more information on.
Okay, I'll say one thing.
Oh, thank you.
I can't shut my mouth, right?
Thank you.
So one thing that I think is different, we've always looked at grades and we've done that credit. But when you're there really looking at the social emotional health of students and the behavior and really looking at those metrics and having an early warning system for those things, I think that's been the power for me in our work. Never thought about a child that way, tracking that and thinking about that as being a healthy kid and making sure we keep them on track. So I'd say that was the most powerful work.
The behavior aspect.
And every single one of our early warning systems has those aspects in it.
And I can out my younger brother, Jeremy. This is his first day back after 3
That's
weeks.
your brother?
As it 3 weeks as a baby daddy. He has
Baby
been on
daddy.
paternity leave for
Oh,
3 weeks
congrats.
until
Still
today.
haven't
So
seen pictures.
you
but
chime
yeah.
in every time, baby. That's it.
Awesome. Congratulations.
I feel an adult time, man.
Bitch need to make a mess or something.
I almost stood up and applauded, but
Great. And one district always says, and we need choir practice. And we're like, choir practice? Like, everybody goes out for a beer because we need choir practice. So, all right. Early warning systems, yes, it intentionally has you triangulate and weave your data around behavior. Social emotional. So lots of people are looking at social emotional learning. Do all kids feel like there's an adult in the school that cares for them? We had this conversation earlier today. How do we use our early warning system and our youth truth data to find out whether or not kids feel like they're cared for by an adult in the school? And if you look at those kids and then you look at their attendance and their tardies and their academics, it may show up that these kids are wounded and they need support. or they may not feel cared for, but they're knocking it out of park and everything that they're doing. So a lot of this is just to have better, to Jeremy's point, better handle on how our kids are doing. And then the last thing that we've done is we created work groups. So this was basically lots of information on here, then you don't need to know anything except these work groups are across all of your districts. So we are doing professional learning with your school leadership teams, and it's totally tailored to what you need. It's not a dog and pony show. We meet with your district folks and go through slides and activities to make sure that it's going to meet the needs of your schools. The other thing we put together is a systems group that looks at data. And part of this yummy work around early warning systems has come from the work of those data teams. And so the intersection of that is that the goal of this is that when we walk away very shortly, you're able to fly and sustain it. So that it's not another fly-by-night thing, but you've got those infrastructures in place and you know what you need to keep it going. So I love this quote by Fullen. It's not the pace of change that's the culprit, it's the piecemealness and fragmentation that wears us down. Can I have an amen? And that shows up a little bit on your notes, because it is. We do this all the time. We chase the next shiny thing in education versus looking at our data and saying, how are we doing with this? We may not think it's working well for kids. And then we look at the data and go, you know what? We're doing pretty good. We could tweak it and get better at it versus saying, and now we're going to do this. Sorry, my educator side is coming out. We do that to people all the time. And then when you try to introduce something like a database decision-making, they go, oh my God, this too shall pass. But we've done infrastructure work, your board policy, huge, the non-negotiables. So I would say as you look at this one, you're at the top, you're in the blue, right? The funding, the visibility, the dissemination, that's also your superintendents, the support, political, the policy systems and alignment, personal readiness. The district leadership team is in the yellow. That's the group that I've been blessed to work with for the last year. The next line is what the two work groups did so that it makes sense to the consortium districts. And then now we're getting to the schools and training the schools around what this looks like in your own backyard. So it's not a lockstep, you must do it this way. You use MTSS to do MTSS. Here's where we are. We got all this yummy stuff going on. What do we need to do to get better at those 6 components to deliver a robust, differentiated instructional support system for kids? So your role as a board member is super, super important in this. And, you know,
Can you talk about why we didn't start with teachers? Because oftentimes with these initiatives, we do start with teachers, and we asked that question. We wanted to bring everybody in right away.
Yeah.
You said we had a lot of work to do before we got there. Could you
Oh my gosh.
explain that?
The first time I met you guys, March 17th, they're like, well, we just want to let you know that we're going to roll this out in August of last year. And then by the time we were done with the introductory to it, it looked like somebody had passed away. They were like, so having done it over large systems multiple times, that's why things in education don't last. We don't have voices at the table. We don't have the infrastructures in place to do the work. So, and the number one issue for y'all is the data systems. You know, how do we know whether we're doing is working for kids? Well, so that's why we started at the district office, because you don't want to outrun your cover. You don't want your schools to get ahead of where you are as a district. So when I did this in LA, we didn't have a data system. So we built a data system while we were getting schools ready to get trained in year 1, because they wake up and go, where's the data? Oh, here it is. Here's how you know. So what we're doing right now with the early warning systems that your district has developed is, what do you do with a kid who's got 2 reds and a yellow? So what does that resource map have that we did? How does that align with the kids that need support in academics or behavior? So we're aligning your resources with, and if you start with the schools, educational malpractice, in my opinion. It's just not right. They don't have the authority, the will, the skill to do the stuff that we just did. So common language, common understanding, great question. Common language, common understanding is the very beginning of what you had to do with this work. Go slow to go fast. But it's pretty fast, slow. So, yeah.
Have you found teachers to be receptive to this? Or I imagine if I've been a teacher for 15 years, I've seen every few years some
Oh, gosh, yeah.
new program, new curriculum, new Common Core, whatever it happens to be, and there's fatigue there.
Yeah, well, initiative fatigue. So I always tell people, don't call this an initiative because that means it's going to come and go. This too shall pass. And so my experience with this, and even with the principals, they say that, my experience, personal experience in LA and other places, is that you basically untied our hands and let us do what we know we needed to do, which is look at data and make decisions based on the kids right in front of us, instead of the commandments coming down from central office to say thou shalt. We're empowering schools and their leadership teams to look at the kids right in front of them to do the right thing. If that makes sense, with data. So yeah, and that's why it's a go slow to go fast. And that's why we're doing all the infrastructure work first. It's a great question. By the time we get to the schools, which we just started doing the training with the schools, their voice is really important in it. And they don't have to do anything with it except learn, which Sac City is another district that we've been doing this work. And we started during the pandemic. Sac City is about 70,000, 50,000 kids. And when we told all the teams that they didn't have to do anything except learn and breathe, oh my gosh, it was like they won the lottery. Because that's not what they're used to in large districts. Just go do it. Small districts, just go do it. So that's the difference. And so having done this work for a long time, there's lots of people that come in like this. And by about day 3, they're sort of like this. And by day 4, they're like, woo, this is great. So it's how you do it and how you scaffold it. It's a great question, Victor. So I'm just about done. And so what I would say is where we are now, what we're working on now is creating a moniker or that's what that looks like because you're in Sonoma. So we looked at, this is Sacramento City put together on their website. It's really awesome. How they portrayed their instructional responsive curricula, diversity. They have their roots at the bottom are those 6 components of MTSS. It's hard to see it because it's small. And then they use their SPA, which is their school plan for student achievement. And then up those, if you click on those numbers on the website, it takes you to part of their MTSS plan. So what we're doing now is the last time we were together, we came up with, this is what it's going to look like for the consortium because you guys are sort of in wine country. And then in one of the schools, I think this is Healdsburg, started putting sticky notes on all the stuff that's going on. So because what we want to be able to do at some point is we want to be able to get our staff on board, get our other teachers on board. And so what does that look like? How does this take all the work that you've been doing and putting it under one roof or one umbrella, if you will? So what we're working on right now is fleshing this out so that it makes sense for each district that's working on it. And I think ongoing work of what we're doing is basically up here. We're doing the continuing with the district work. I think we have one more meeting tomorrow, and then the school teams are taking all the focus. Support and technical assistance, we're going to have conversations tomorrow. Who is going to be the accountable officer at the district to make sure that this works? How are we going to evaluate whether or not we're doing it with fidelity? What's the evaluation? And as boards, you should want to, close your ears, superintendents, you should want to have a regular report on how it's going. What does the data show? How are we doing? Not overkill, but just, kick the tires to make sure it's moving in the right direction, because your support's really important if we're going to have an accountable officer and we're going to have a data system. How do we know it's working? There has to be some sort of coach and technical assistant that helps the principals and the school teams because people are busy.
So you said, how are we going to know if it's working?
Yeah.
Shouldn't that bear out in the data?
Yes. But do you have regular data reviews at the board level? And I'm not saying, I'm not saying to do this. I'm just saying that you'd want to kick the tires.
I guess the reason why I said that, because I'm trying really hard to not talk. So that way I can
You're doing a great
listen
job,
and
Rich.
learn.
You're doing a great job.
But I'm kind of a little bit like Jeremy. I can't help it. So.
Oh, we are not comparing right now.
No. He is much taller than I am. So the biggest concern that I have is, to your point, every 2 years, here comes a whole nother thing that the teachers don't want to hear. So if I was a teacher, I'm empathetic that they're all of a sudden, here's something that here's a program that I didn't ask for, that now is getting pushed on me, that now I'm going to be asked, how am I doing? Am I doing this new program? Which I really don't want to do because I don't see the value in it possibly or not.
Yeah.
And whatever, right? So that's one track. And the other track is, hey, here's a teacher that, man, I'm a little over my skis. I don't know exactly. Here's a program I can attach to that actually tells me if the kids are like, one yellow, two reds, whatever, this is maybe things I could do. Gives them some ideas. So I can see both ways. I guess the real question is how much buy-in are the boards going to have and the superintendent's going to have, where this is a program that now perpetuates. And then every 2 years you have elections. Is it going to stay so that way the teachers have some certainty of what they're doing? So then that way the data that we get every year, we can follow cohorts, we can, along the way, we can see if we are improving or not. Versus this, oh, we have a new consultant and they have this new apple. And then we have a new consultant, they have this new pear. It's a fruit, but it's different. And every couple of years.
And it's shiny.
Not always. So anyhow, that's how do we get our teachers to buy off when they, how do we let them know that this is certain that we're going to do this?
Please.
So, thank you. So I think it's important to acknowledge that change is really difficult. It's hard to change. I mean, even for those of us that want to change, we're always a little reticent because we don't want to make mistakes and we don't want to lead people down the wrong path. That's going to lead to kind of a short-lived effort. And I think part of the work that we've been doing through our little consortium is that we've been building teacher capacity. Well, actually, we're not even there yet. We've been building superintendent and administrator capacity to understand what the work is, what MTSS is, what it's not, and then really kind of giving us a refresher on data-driven decisions, how to pull data. We're actually all looking at our student information systems, like assessment data systems, and evaluating, does it actually capture the information that we need to? We found out in ours that we have overall grade level information, but we don't have the subgroups. We don't have the ELL information that in district-wide that a data system can provide. We don't have the students with disabilities data that a system can provide. So we're actually building one from scratch. And I think a lot of the districts are doing the same thing. And so it's about building capacity, like she said, from the top down, because we have to be able to know, have our nuts and bolts together about the whole thing before we roll it out to the sites so that we can actually be a support to them and be able to provide them with what we need. But we also have to know what we're doing. And I think taking also the long-term approach allows it to become kind of a cultural change. And we know that cultural change takes about 5 to 7 years. So this is going to be a long-term effort. I don't expect that we'll be able to see the, we may, but I don't expect to be able to see the fruits that we want to see within the first 3 years that we have this out. But if we sustain it, I know you can beg to differ. But I think sustainability is a goal also. Yes. And in order to really have this take root and sustain, we're going to have to look at the processes that we have in place for that, such as onboarding. We have sometimes teachers retiring, new teachers coming on board, new principals being hired. So we have to have a mechanism for making sure that it self-perpetuates and that we're intentional about it if we're really vested in this. And that's why we made sure that as a working group, that we didn't just at the administrative level come to agreement that, yes, this is something we all want to do. Yes, we see that this is right for our district, but we wanted to also bring in our school boards because we figure top, I'll say left to right. We want our board members to our classified staff be invested in this because everybody has a role. And you're right, we're always going to be fighting against change is difficult and cultural shift is difficult. But if we work, what is the quote? If we work slowly to go fast, it'll work. And I've been fortunate enough to see something similar to this work in a positive direction in another district many years ago. And I'm really super excited about what it can do for our kids now, especially for the kids that really need this change. The kids that have always fallen through the cracks, that don't have the loudest voice at the table. And so I'm excited about what we can do. And I think we have to just maintain our why. Remember that amazing grace.
I would say
That's all I have.
hopefully We can support teachers because I know we've all looked at ourselves with tier 2 interventions. Talk about behavior in general, especially here in Windsor. We have some issues. Paul, you're subbing all the time. You see it, right? It's our students that there's behavior issues in classrooms. And right now, we've identified that we don't have much support for those students who are struggling or for our teachers. So hopefully, if we can, through this process, identify where our shortcoming is, create a structure or a system that fixes that issue, then our teachers will see the value in what we're doing. It's not another thing so much as it's putting the bike together.
Right, yeah.
It's not another
Well,
thing.
I just want to jump in. As a teacher, and I still sub, so I'm still in the classroom.
Good.
The thing that's going to either make or break this is how much support the teachers are given. In my opinion, because I've seen things that will, curl your hair if you have straight hair, or straighten it if you have curly hair. But I mean, it's the behavior part of this equation that has most teachers probably concerned, or how are they going to deal with that behavior in the classroom that's disrupting the class while the teacher is trying to teach any tier, care if it's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Also, that they need help in guiding them into their instruction. If you just say, okay, here's all your data. Okay, now this is a nice grouping here. This is a nice grouping here. This is a nice grouping here for kids. The teacher's going to go, okay, great. Well, how do I do that?
That's the resource mapping. What do we have in the district?
Exactly. So I think teachers would buy into it if they really felt like they were getting support. And I'm talking about a body, not just the teacher being in there alone, like an assistant, or they have to have that resource. And I'll be advocating, Mr. Decker and the district, for this to be successful, that you have to have those additional.
In lots of places that I work, they repurpose FTE. They don't necessarily have to come up with more FTE. They look at, and I don't want to give you stories, but I had to do that in LA. And we repurposed the positions that we had. Some people have reading coaches or math coaches, and they've turned them into data coaches or MTSS coaches. But everybody has, the easy part of this work, to your point, Paula, is that it's the training. Teachers come, they learn, we do some cool things, we do planning, all that stuff. But then they go back to the reality of their school, and the principal does as well. And so who's going to poke the principal to say, hey, don't forget? Or let me sit with you and look at your data and have that conversation before you take it to a grade level meeting or a faculty meeting or something. So absolutely, part of that is why I put this up here, is that the funding support about how do you repurpose or how do we allocate some of the supports that we know are necessary to do this.
No, that helps, because I'm thinking about, conversations that we had. Well, every, teacher's assistant is going to cost blah, blah, blah money. We don't have that. And it's like, okay, well, let's be creative. Let's figure out how to use, like you were saying, how to use some of the resources we already have.
You bet.
And make it work.
Absolutely. Because that to me, it goes down to data. So to go back, Rich, your comment that you made, if we're not a data-driven district, we go to the pears and the apples because we're throwing stuff. Somebody said it earlier. We throw stuff against the wall and see if it sticks. But we never go back and look at not you guys, anywhere else. We don't go back and look at the data to see whether or not it's working. And so the teachers are like, this too shall pass. So I'm doing a ton of work with secondary schools in the Midwest. And the number one thing that the teams that we work with say, it's teacher buy-in. And it's the same thing. It's because we've never looked at data. We chase the new thing that's coming down the pike. We don't deliver data-based professional learning. We deliver something that somebody went to a conference and thought it was really cool. And now we're going to do this versus saying, our reading looks like we need, or our 9th grade algebra looks like, how do we support our teachers to be even more better than they are now in delivering the instruction? So, and that's data-based professional learning, not because somebody thinks it's a good idea, but because your data shows it. We're getting there. We're not there yet as a consortium, but that's where we are. And that's why the teachers dig their heels in a lot of times. But we'll get there. Promise. Been doing this for a long time. And I'm happy to say that in LA, I haven't been there for a long time. They're still doing it. Because once you teach people how to use their data and how to problem solve and do something about it, you can never take that back. They got it. They see the value of it. The board policy is still there. All the stuff that we do in LA around board policies is all still there, and they're still doing it. Cool. So I appreciate this is where we are in the agenda, to just any questions, wonderings, thoughts.
Some people, and this is not just in education, it's business as well.
Sure.
Are resistant to data because data, there's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics, right? So there's some fear, maybe at the principal level, maybe at the teacher level, maybe even at some parts of the leadership. How have you seen that, and how have you overcome it?
That seems to be a big thing in Sonoma, not just here, but Sonoma County, because I've worked with other places within the county. So the 4-step problem-solving process, the problem-solving process that your teams are engaged in, really takes the emotion out. And everybody, you can talk about this. So it's not meant to use as a hammer. It's meant to use as a feather to tickle folks to say, we got to do something a little bit different. A lot of times we use it as a hammer. NCLB, we learned it was a hammer. This work is, so what I always tell people, my gold standard in this work is that you create an environment where people feel safe to take risks. And they can say, I know what you're trying to get us to do, but I have no idea how to do it. That is the gold standard for me. And so when we start this work with your schools, we started with the belief survey. We started with the needs assessment. Where are you? What do you think you got going on? Because if you don't have a belief statement around, we believe all kids can learn. So people will say, we believe all kids can learn, but your data is down here. So then what we do is we work to align your beliefs with your data. So all of that is through we use a case study. So we have to relearn that behavior, that it's not to be a hammer. But yes, there is resistance to that. Yeah, let's go.
To Victor's point, at least my experience has been that teachers, educators, we look at data and we go, oh. And we look at kind of what we were doing here, is that how many are in the red?
Yeah.
As opposed to, let's see what's successful. I'm a 4th grade teacher. I look at the 3rd grade end of the year results, and I look and I see, okay, these things are very successful. How'd you do that? Or these things were not. What did you do? Or one
100%.
3rd grade teacher's data is very strong, same skill level, or same skill, and another teacher's isn't. Was it those 5 kids that were having problems, or was it the way the teacher did it?
Yep.
And I think once data, you begin to not, as you say, use the hammer,
right,
but say, look at, these are the things, and it's okay. It's okay that those kids didn't do well. I mean, you're not a bad person because they did. What did you do to help them? And that maybe this other teacher didn't have that skill or didn't have that thought. It's
Some
like,
of the
oh,
best.
if only I had known. Thank you.
Yeah, and some of the best professional learning is for teachers by teachers.
Yes.
I'm the principal. I'm going to cover your class. You're going to go observe a teacher that is really good at XYZ, could be behavior. I taught all the behavior kids. So come and watch me manage kids, because when that kid gets into your class, they're out of control. So come and watch me. And then I'm going to come and watch you, not to evaluate, but just to your point, we're sharing. So it's not threatening. It's people for teachers by teachers.
And also build I just have data plus PD, also build, and you said this before, build that professional learning, that professional development, so the teachers have the skill. So they have the understanding, the knowledge, and the skill to not send them off.
Yep.
Go not to
Yep.
fix it, not
Yep.
to the reading special. You go fix them over there and you come back and you'll be
That's
a grade
problem.
level.
Yep.
But I'm the teacher, my job, specialist help me teach.
So, so Joyce and Showers is a group of researchers, and years ago they said this, and it's true. People will get on board with what you're selling or what you're introducing if they see the need and they know they're going to get support and skills to do what you're asking them to do. And so that's what you're hearing. We got to look at the data to see the need, and we're going to give you some skills and support to do it. So whether it's, coaches and FTE, it's the training that we're doing with the teams, it's the go slow to go fast. We're not jamming it down to the building. So yeah.
The one part about this we haven't talked about is working on administrative, building that capacity, then to teachers, building that capacity. At what point do we then bring this out to the parents? So that way the parents understand what we're trying to do. So that way they understand the tools that the teachers are using, the administrators are using to help their kid. So that way the parents can now take this one step further, and at home, they can, so that way it's consistent all the way along. Where does that?
It's a great question. And
Come
we can
in.
talk about that a little bit tomorrow. So when you get to the point that your parents, you're going to want to have a brochure, an MTSS brochure, or a landing page on your website that says MTSS in all the languages that your parents speak. We did town hall meetings, if you will, or community meetings with our parents to say, here's what it is and here's where, what we're doing to educate them. So that's a call of your superintendents and your leadership teams to find out when. You're not there yet, because you're just barely into the year one training of your teams. But I would say within the next year or shorter, depends. You just don't want to outrun your cover, because you don't want to ever put something in front of parents that the schools are not ready and we're going to blindside them.
One of the
go
most
ahead, Chris.
powerful ways to pitch it to parents, for lack of a better term, is Louis Gansler, who is our interim curriculum instruction person, is now at SCO. He doesn't have a title yet. He's assistant soup of something, but school safety and climate is a big part of what he's doing. And through tons of studies, MTSS is perhaps the singular most powerful thing to building safe schools, right? So violence in schools is on all of our minds, obviously in Sonoma County and nationally. Because this addresses students' emotional well-being and behaviors, MTSS, when done well and systematized, is going to be a system that doesn't let anybody fall through the cracks and hopefully prevents terrible, heinous acts like we've seen in the news. So I've wrote a piece to parents already saying this is one of the things we're doing to address it. But I think that's a big selling point for parents to get them to buy in initially. And SCO will be pitching it too.
The timing of that really is based individually. I can't really, answer that, but I think you're right. The parents are totally integral. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Yes, sir.
Sort of as the slowest of the three districts rolling out, and I'll sort of direct this to Sharon. I know we're in year one next year. Do we do any outreach? Do students see it? Do parents become integrated into this over our summer? Do we possibly implement some of this in January, halfway through an academic year? Or do we need a full year and ramp this up to the retail rollout, for lack of a better term, in 24, 25?
I've never done this before.
Okay,
but I
well,
would think.
we got the pro from Dover sitting right
but
here.
Being a part of it from the beginning and going slow, really slow. And first working with district personnel and then going to principals and now going to teachers. And then teachers are going to start implementing and training other teachers at the school. I would hope to wait at least another year before involving parents and students.
And I'd say we're in similar spots.
Okay.
I don't think that
Okay.
any one of us is behind or ahead. I think we're all.
Yeah.
You're all in the
You're not
same
the
step.
slowest.
Okay.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I wanted to add also that our hope is that we all implement at around the same time and that we're moving through it at the same time. Because what we found is that we have a lot of wealth among each other, and the collaboration has really yielded a lot of support for one another, idea sharing. And so we'd like to continue with that. So, and then we all have agreed to, with the whole thing, go slow to go fast. And so we do want to unveil this at the same time.
Did you say that there's a lot of wealth among us?
Oh, there is.
Wealth of
Well,
knowledge.
not just from there, not just from there.
You two basic aid schools are gonna send some.
We love sharing. We love sharing.
A different kind of wealth.
So as a practical and political rollout, then, do we have another one of these joint meetings? When you say rollout, I'm not sure at what point early in the fall do we come up, and we say, look, we have a series of consortium rolls out. Because I think people, they're aware of it. Teachers are aware of it, that it's another thing. And is this like the solution? I think we need some help for the deliberate communication and outreach plan. And look, we've been spending time, our budget watchers, though there are only a few, but we have, labor groups that'll say, well, I see that there's $1 million plus towards this MTSS thing. You haven't explained it. You're hiding money on us again. And how that just, it strikes me that there's strength in numbers, but I think we need to be clear, because until I asked you, I wasn't clear. I don't think we're starting with students in August, and doesn't sound
No.
like maybe in January. So getting that part of the elevator speech for us, right, and my counterparts on the boards, I think is important. And the strength in numbers by having the districts do it together possibly could be very powerful.
And I think the other thing is that, your school leadership teams and your district folks, your school leadership teams are getting trained. The goal is to have that group be able to sprinkle it and do faculty meetings and get get your math department or get your third grade teams together and organically grow it versus going, you're going to do this, which is what we do in education. This is really meant to be more organic, to your point, is to not have people be afraid of the data, but you're building the trust, if you will. That we're gonna,
And I think it's actually happening.
Okay.
So we've had our third training day with all the districts and all the schools and their MTSS site teams, which was composed of teachers and school psychs or counselors, kind of a conglomeration of different staff members. And they've had to go through the learning process and practicing and looking at data and had to feel uncomfortable for a while and confused. And this last meeting, people are really saying like, oh my gosh, we're doing it. And now they're reaching out to their principals saying, we want to do this. Like, we're ready. But we had to go slow.
It would be really good, I believe, if the three superintendents, which you guys already are, but made more of a concerted effort to make sure that as things are rolled out in your own districts, but they're kind of rolled out similarly in all the districts. And the reason why is, Windsor, we have a pretty decent number of kids at the younger grades that are over Mark West. So the families have some kids in some school districts, some in others. The same with Hillsburg. So this is a good little community area. So that way the information that's getting to the families is fairly consistent, irregardless of what grade level the kids are in. So that way when mom and dad hear X, right? Whether they're hearing it from their second grader and the teachers at that level, or they're hearing it from the ninth graders or whatever, it's kind of consistent and it works along. So I think as the north of Santa Rosa families we're kind of all interwoven. So that's why I think this meeting is really well done anyway. That you three kind of shepherd this through, so that way the families of everybody's stuff is getting it somewhat consistent in timing, but more in theme and what they're doing. So I think that would be very valuable.
Judy's pushed us to do that. That's part of what the picture is that you saw, is us creating something.
Oh,
Yeah.
We all use.
The vines, right? Yeah.
We're just
Yeah.
not there yet. That's the next thing, really.
I didn't see ours. I saw Windsor's and
this is everybody's, this is the consortium. Oh, and then you can personalize it. So we came to consensus at our last meeting is that, some of the stuff's the same. So what's going to be the same across all three districts is that vine. And it was, whose secretary did it? Your secretary.
Laurel.
Laurel.
Laurel, yeah, Laurel.
Laurel, I was like, oh my gosh, she's the artist in residence. So, and then what will be personalized is this to each district. And then tomorrow we're gonna have more conversation about how do you get this on your website? So if people are poking through your website for your district, they fall upon this. There's a part for parents, there's a part for.
The idea is to get one designer, a web designer to make it for us, and then we'll individualize, right? But it'll be a similar design for each district and we'll post it around the same time. So we'll enroll it together.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great idea next year to have a check-in, maybe do a joint meeting again, just where we are. I don't know if it's in the fall, it might be better in the spring.
Yeah, or close to the end of first semester.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
so, these are awesome comments and questions. I mean, I think as a board, I would push you to ask for accountability of the work that's going on, ask for, maybe updates with later, early warning systems, update, because I ask for that stuff when I come, right?
I have another question, Judy, and it went back maybe about 40% through. There was a unfilled yellow chart that said data, and what's working. It was tier 1. And it seemed to me that looked like sort of a baseline inventory.
Resource map.
We're doing X, Y, and Z programs to teach, and there's somewhere, because I don't necessarily agree in principle that we don't have the data. It seems like we micrometer our kids to death. I don't know that we use it or we track it and we
And
don't
there's that.
necessarily put it together. Keep going back a little bit.
Maybe.
So I wanted this, okay, there it is. So, we're doing stuff right on the left, and how's it working? So that it strikes me that there's sort of a data proactive cycle that we go through, but we're not necessarily throwing the baby out with the bathwater for what we're already doing. And I think from a staff standpoint, and particularly from students, we have administrators and longtime teachers who have succeeded by doing what has worked, and they're kind of sometimes a little bit resistant to change. I think that's similar with students. When I got on the board 10 years ago with 3 grade clustered elementary schools, a middle school and a high school, we had 3 separate, distinct, unconnected math programs. And we wondered why our math scores sucked. And the kids didn't, they'd get to 5th grade or 9th grade and they were adding differently. And the language was different. So my point is, this seems to be sort of a good inventory baseline. And we are, as a district, sort of familiar with that. We've done that with visual and performing arts. We've done that with some of our professional development and our social emotional learning. And I like that. That struck me as familiar, that, it's sort of build on what works, identify the strengths, get rid of what's not working, but start with where we are.
Yes.
Because we've never cycled back in the 10 years I've been doing
100%.
this to go other than, so the Smarter Balanced or STAR test has come in. How do we do? Let's get our disaggregated data. All right, a little better. Thank you. Move on. Now the facilities report, right? And we
Yeah.
just don't connect the dots back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's great
That's-
observation.
I wanted to make sure that that's.
Yeah, no, that's
was
it.
what-
That's
was
great.
what it
So you were
said.
paying attention, Bill. It's awesome.
And I will.
And there's tier 2 and tier 3 to
Yeah.
this as well. And I would tell you that the hardest part about this is the last column on the right.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because everybody's got an opinion about what they think, but
Sure.
yeah. So to your point, I'm sorry.
It's
Lisa.
okay. And I will add that Judy's counterpart, Brian, he led at the districts in this last Tuesday when we all met. It was part of our day 3 session, is that each of the site leadership teams were starting to go through this themselves. And so it wasn't just like principals sitting down and saying what's on the list. It wasn't just like your admin sitting down and saying what was on the list. It was everybody that's at that site that's part of that leadership team going, no, I've got this. And the counselor going, oh, but I also do this. So that teachers go, oh, you do?
We got
And
more
the
stuff than we know we
conversation
have.
started.
I was going to add that he's also starting to go through a very strategic way of determining whether something is working, whether you don't
Good.
know if it's working or whether it's not working, and not to throw something out that you're not sure is working, and talked a lot about fidelity and is something being rolled out the way that it's intended.
And the other piece I loved was the special education core of the tree graphic, whatever that was, right? That we are not only like talking the talk, but we're mainstreaming. There we go. There it was that one. Yeah. That, and I like that specially designed. So it's not just special ed, but there's other things that would maybe be the interventions or the whatever that we are already doing. Because we have a deliberate intent. We have, well, you guys aren't part of the North County Consortium. You're in what they call Nifty Nines? I don't know. Get a better name. We have NCC, so we're all of our sister districts to the north, right? And so we have a disproportionately high special education community here, on purpose in some ways, but we are trying to scale it back. Thank heavens, thank you.
On
She
purpose.
wrote- On purpose.
Why?
We think we over designated, I would say.
Oh, is that what you mean on purpose? Okay, yeah.
No. Well, it's been large. So we're
Because
trying
the
to
tier one
purposefully.
isn't what it needs to be and we don't use
Yes.
our data.
Yes, and
ran
but
special
I
ed for a
love
long
that
time.
because all of a sudden it's not just a branch, it's not another trunk, right? In parallel, because right now I think we have in some ways, or at least we've inherited as we've looked at it, another trunk that has been special education and the nearly 30% of our budget that is directed from our general fund back to restricted funds because that's how much we're spending. Just because, and it's less than it's been for a while.
Well, and the law's really clear. You can't put a kid on an IEP if you didn't deliver robust evidence-based instruction. And we do that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Put kids in IEPs because
Yeah.
they aren't being successful versus the fact that there's a legitimate disability.
Thank you. That was two of your
Great.
slides that were very striking to me.
Other comments, questions, wonderings?
But what do you all need as the soups from us as the boards that we're not doing? What do you need? If we're going to repurpose FTEs, is that a conversation we have concurrently in a kind, gentle, loving way with classified and certificated unions so that it's not a lost job, it's a different job? Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that that's a wonderful way to say it, to repurpose them. If you're a TOSA, you've got some, whoever was the TOSA, right? You've got chops and some longevity, and honoring that in another way to say, through this process, right, for these purposes, I think is an important strategy that we should be asked by our superintendents, how can we help with that? Is that more than just money? Because most of this stuff, I never think it's money, it's culture. And money will help, but it's the culture shifts we need to do. So I'd be interested from hearing from all three of who I respect a
I
great
think
deal.
at this point, it's just support us. We don't yet know what we'll need in terms of, fiscal resources. We're still in that development phase, exploration, implementation. And so right now, everyone is learning and just learn with us.
So, for example, you're doing robust professional development. Should we anticipate for a calendar or for the summer or for some other breaks, a handful more PD days that would be a natural investment to this that we should maybe propose to the unions? And we do, in Windsor, we have. Okay, I mean, that's what I'm thinking about, to say, you need.
Another 4 to 5 days next year.
Okay, that's
Year
what I'm
two.
talking about. Tell
2
us.
years.
Yeah, because we're, in 6 weeks, we're doing our budgets. And I think having that conversation, because we have watchers who will come and they'll say, now we know what's going to be important to this school district because they're talking about what's going to be in the budget.
Yeah.
And highlighting that it's new and some more, and here's why. Stay tuned, because in 24, 25, you're going to see the retail impact on your students. I think that's a pretty compelling story. But help us figure out how we can help you guys do that.
What Rachel said, just supporting us. And the other piece, I think, this is, in my mind, the single most important project we have going. And it should take priority in our PD days, and it should take priority in my attention and time. And your school board members, you're the same way, right? Like, you get hit from all sides with all different kinds of things and initiatives and wants and needs. But we need to keep a singular focus on this to really drive it and make good change for kids. So support us in that, in keeping this the most important thing that we do.
And that's what I was going to say as well. I mean, there's lots of good ideas. Board members always have good ideas. Teachers have good ideas, principals do, but there's so many things that we can do, and this is what we focus on. So to make sure that we stay on track and support that track, I think it's probably the most important thing. Financially, yes, Bill, we're gonna get there,
Okay.
right? But we've still got to go through a large process to determine, should our schedules change? Does that modify our FTE? Do we need to add another,
And it's going to change over the next few years,
Yeah,
right?
I
It's
got
not
it.
just once.
So
Yeah.
I will tell you, just for me and those like me who are sitting here, and thank you so much, this has been great. Remind us that we sat at a meeting and we're going to have others, I hope, right? Say, no, another straw goes into Camel's thing. That's going to dilute the effort towards MTSS.
So
'Cause
the push
sometimes
would be, if you bring another straw, you have to say, where does this fit?
Exactly. And please
Where
be
does it
empowered.
fit?
I've had this conversation, this is the second or third time I've been president of the board. And some of our predecessor soups didn't do that. We're reluctant to say, oh yeah, we'll get it done kind of people, as opposed to now everything's getting done half-assed at 75%. And I'm drinking the Kool-Aid on this, but help us remember this as your board governance team partners, because, stuff percolates up from the ranks and everything. And I know sometimes it percolates over from the dais where we meet up there. Okay, you guys got a curiosity. We're going to go into that. And Sharon was going to be working on something else for a while, but now she'll prepare that report.
Well, and that's why I'm saying, so as a board, I would want to have on your radar when you want to have an update on the work in the
Yes.
district, whether we do another one of these or whether you individually say, hey,
Yeah.
we'd love to have an update once a semester, whatever that looks like
Okay.
in
Do
your.
we want to have
in your
another
rhythm.
one of these next year? Do you want to get together? I mean, that's you guys. You make this decision, board members.
I think it's powerful, and I'd put it in the media. I'll just say it. I think, if we want to be trotting it out, I think we're ahead of the curve. I think it's powerful. I think it's
have to
helpful
make
for our
that
communities.
decision,
It's
yeah.
helpful for our community of Windsor to know that we're working with other folks. We sometimes don't get that kind of traction and trust amongst our particular 500.
Yeah, I'll leave
Staff.
that to you,
Yeah.
board members to sort of, and superintendents to have that discussion and.
Just like
decide.
in Windsor, we have our
Yes.
town council
Yes.
and the school board, we meet once or twice a year. I mean, I like the fact that, as neighbor districts, that we're getting
Cool.
together this time. One, we're friends with a lot of each other anyway.
Yeah.
But just even if it's not this, but maybe this is part of it, but just, hey, how are things going in your
Yeah.
group? How are things going over there? What's working well? What do you, what is it we're each doing that's making things better for kids? I think it'd be good. And maybe next time we have a whole bunch of food spread out too.
There's no revenue sharing, okay?
What's that?
But we can come up to you as Windsor host and provide some food.
Come on, Chris.
You can bring some montage chow.
All right,
Chris is buying dinner. We figured that out.
your exit ticket,
Yes.
you have stickies.
So, before, so your question was, how do we measure all these things, right?
Yeah.
How are we now measuring whether this meeting was a feel good or if this meeting was are we progressing? How do I know as a board member that something productive and measurable based on data that you superintendents are going to bring back to us is moving slow, but in the right direction? How do I know that we're moving in the right direction still?
Because you're asking for an update on it, like I said, either once a semester or once every, quarter or something like that. You're asking for an update based on really targeted things, not like everything, how's it going, but here's the.
Two tangible things that come to mind, and you
yeah,
can correct me, if
go.
I'm wrong. Like, do we operationalize our early warning system and have it at least piloting in the fall where we're getting data back at the sites? And on-
That's not fast enough for me, but yes.
Well,
No, I'm,
Yeah.
you
so
know.
I like your definition of slow.
We are, in Healdsburg, we're literally writing our own program.
Yeah, no, right now they're writing
Yeah.
You guys
programs.
were embedding it in area.
You can see I'm a very patient person.
Okay.
Faster.
Yeah, and then the other piece is the resource map. Like, did we get a resource map done
Yeah.
to you guys, right? So
Where are the
those are two
holes? Yep.
tangible deliverables that you would see. Yeah.
Because the reason why I ask is I want to
Great
go right
question.
back to the very beginning of what you asked us. And is every classroom on your campus where you would want to put your own flesh and blood?
Yep.
Now, I have flesh and blood grandkids that are in and coming up. So the answer to your question is I want to be able to say yes
Bet.
to all,
You
not,
bet.
hey, that,
I know the superintendent. Can you get my kid into so-and-so's class?
yeah. So,
Nobody would ever do that.
No.
but the point is, are we gonna, I want to get there a little sooner maybe.
Yeah.
Than, just like every parent or grandparent. So how do you guys see it?
I
We
think
need to
Chris
go,
said it.
we need to go slow,
The fast
get there
slow.
fast.
It's a fast
But I
slow.
Those are
we
two
all-
tangible
Those
deliverables
are-
that we can give you guys in an update, basically.
And we're gonna
Yeah,
hit
yeah.
those again tomorrow, because, let's get this done. And so we're moving. These folks have done an amazing job and have done a ton of work in the last year. And your patience is, it's been amazing. And so we're building the infrastructure. Your point about, do we need more support? Do we need coaching supports? Do we need, for me, at some point, we have to have conversations about classroom instruction.
Right.
All of that good stuff. So here's your exit ticket. And you have stickies. So all you're going to do is what resonates based on what you heard. What resonates with you? Do I have another thing under here? Yes. So you can do up to 3 for both. You can do as many as you want. What resonates? And there's a sheet over there for each, because we want to keep some of this. What resonates with you and what makes you wonder based on what you heard, where you're going, what resonated with you and what makes you wonder. And then just post your stickies, and I want to thank you for your time and attention today. It was my delight.
Thank you, Judy.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Appreciate your support. You got great leaders running this work.
Is there one for each
Yeah,
over
one
there?
for each. You can put as many stickies up as you want for each. So makes you wonder, resonates. It's really light, but
You're done. You can do it all in 1 year.
Put as many of them as you want, many stickies as you want. They're free. They are, they're free.
I know, bring the draft. New iteration.
That's all right. That's good. Thank you. I heard good things.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure to meet you.
Great meeting you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, teacher at college. Yeah.
Pleasure.
You too. I know, I didn't really talk
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to meet you. I didn't.
Stephanie and I went to go. She's their board member. Yeah.
Pleasure to meet you. Thank you. And me. Thanks for your
Yeah, you too. How are you?
Good. Hey.
Things going on.
They're good. I just feel like we're continued into this.
Yeah, I know. Did you have kids at college?
No, I have one left.
Oh.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Crazy.
Oh my God, this is on all the time?
Yeah.